With me today, I have the MUSETEX Y6. I'm going to tear this case down, take a look at it, talk about its main features real quick. Hopefully that'll help you make a decision if this is the right case for you. One of the main aesthetics to this case is all of the glass here. So let's talk about how to get the side panel off. Very easy to do. There's just a little lip back here. You want to grab it and kind of give it a firm pull. Now you will have to kind of pull it a little bit more, and there's just two little pins up here that engage into the case. Now there's a little lip down here that holds it on pretty good, so it's not going to come flying off. Just grab the panel, lift it up, and you get the little lip on the bottom here that engages the rear of the case. But you can take that off and set it aside. Now that panel is protected by a plastic piece of film on the outside. There is no plastic protector on the inside, so use caution there. And we've got our front glass, which we do need to remove this front top fan in order to gain access to it. But once that front fan is removed, then we can remove the 4 screws to get the front glass off. Once you get the 4 screws removed, the front glass will just kind of pop off, and it's just got some metal mounting brackets here that kind of engage into the front of the case. It's very easy to do, and you can set that aside. As I mentioned earlier, generally I don't think it'll be necessary to remove that front panel, but sometimes it's nice just to have a lot of working room in here. So looking on the rear here, we've got 6 PCI slots, and we've got a cover that covers the screws on that. Just undo the thumb screw, and that little flap opens up, giving you access to the screws to remove those slots. We have the ability to mount a rear fan. Now you can do a 120 millimeter or a 140 millimeter fan here, as well as a 120 millimeter radiator or a 140 millimeter radiator if you choose to do that. Obviously this is the I/O plate for your motherboard, and we have the power supply mounting bracket right here. There's nothing else really on the rear here to speak of, other than you do have a bunch of perforations for airflow. Now the back panel is removed just like the front panel. There's just a little lip here up the top. You want to give it a nice firm tug, and those 2 pins come out, and then you have a nice lip down here at the bottom. You just kind of wiggle it off, and the back panel comes out. Once you get the back panel off, this exposes where all of your I/O cables are, your fan cables, and all your cable management areas. This is also where the power supply is going to be. And of course you can see the rear area of the 2 side mounted fans here. Now I will say on the back panel there is perforations for airflow here. There is no filter material here though. Now, MUSETEX has mounted these 2 side fans as exhaust fans, so you don't really need filter material there to begin with. Now, I will put some links in the description below to some filter material that you can purchase. You just put it on there, cut it to fit, and it's got some magnetic. You might need 1 or 2 of those. I would recommend, if you're going to switch these around to intake fans and probably over your power supply, probably want to put some filter material there. You do get a box of accessories here. What is in the box is the instruction set, some of the basic screws you need for mounting your power supply and motherboard, and some zip ties. On the rear here, you also get the drive cage. Now this has room for 2 3.5-inch drives or 2 2.5-inch SSDs in here. Now this drive cage can be removed. There's 4 Phillips head screws here in the back, so let's go ahead and take this out. And once you get all the 4 screws out, the cage assembly just comes out. On the side here, you get room to mount 220 millimeter fans. 140 millimeter fans will not fit, so be aware of that. Also back here, you get access to the I/O panel itself. It can be removed. There's 3 screws here, and the panel just comes out. Speaking of the I/O that's included with this case, you do get the power button, the reset button, headphone jack, USB 3.0, USB 2.0, and a USB-C connector. Now as far as cable management goes, the only thing you really get back here, there are 3 Velcro straps kind of down this one channel here, which depending on the hardware that you're going to put in, it will be adequate. You might have to get a little bit creative. As always, in every case, you have to kind of find your way through it. There is plenty of length in these I/O cables here, so you should be able to get to anywhere on your motherboard that you'll need to, which might be important because the way the motherboard mounts here, like a full ATX motherboard, is going to cover up all of these access holes down here at the bottom. So you may have to come in from the side. We'll talk about that more in a minute, but you might have to get creative in how to run some of these. What I do like is that these cables are white, and the connectors on the ends of them are white. A lot of white cases have black cables in them, which is fine, but I do like the fact that these are white. Now on the top of the case, we do get our magnetic dust filter. It's got a little flap on here. You just grab that and pull it off. Easy to remove, and that does expose all of the mounting locations for your top fans and radiators. On the flip side, on the bottom, we do have the same dust filter. Again, just a little flap here, and you can pull that off, exposing all of the fan and radiator mounting locations on the bottom of the case. For cooling on the top, MUSETEX has installed 320 millimeter fans for you. You can also put 240 millimeter fans. Radiator support on the top is going to be a 360 or a 280 or anything lower than that. And for the bottom of the case, it's basically going to be the same spec. 320 millimeter fans, two 140 millimeter fans. The system does come from MUSETEX with 5 pre-installed 120 millimeter fans. Now the fans themselves have 4-pin PWM connectors and a 3-pin 5-volt ARGB connector. Now the fans themselves have like a 6-pin connector on it, but it connects into like this daisy chain cable. And basically what you'll be left with the stock 5 fans anyways, are 2 little connectors here. But if you choose to use these, they are standard connections that work with your motherboard headers or a controller of your choice. MUSETEX has pre-installed all 5 of these fans as exhaust fans. So you're going to want to take a look at what cooling needs you have. And I would imagine the majority of you are going to install some fans at the bottom here. I've seen a couple different pictures online, people doing various things, often making the bottom fans intake fans, and even these intake fans over here on the side, they're flipping these around and then just leaving the 3 exhaust fan. That's probably a pretty good solution for this in most cases. This would be a really good use case for the SWA Fan EX from Thermaltake, where you can swap the blade around and get the look in here. Regardless of which fans you go to, just be aware that if you're going to use the pre-existing fans here, you're going to need to either add to it or make some accommodations here. Now you can purchase these fans from MUSETEX. I'll link to them in the description below. But right on the product page on Amazon, you can find the link to these. I think it was, at the last time I looked, about 30 bucks for 3 additional ones. So you could populate that here if you want to stick with this fan, because overall it's not a bad looking fan at all. It's not a real expensive fan by any means, but I would imagine the vast majority of you are going to be putting AIOs in this. You're going to probably be replacing these fans anyways. I haven't seen any exact specifications for these fans, but when I tell the Gigabyte motherboard to run the header at 100%, I'm getting an RPM of about 1400, give or take a little bit there. That sounds about right. I have to believe these fans are kind of in that range of a 1400 RPM fan. Now these fans really just are airflow fans suitable as a case fan. They're not suitable for using behind a radiator. Even the MUSETEX documentation is saying if you're going to use a radiator, use the fans that come with the radiator, not these. The documentation says the case supports ATX and micro ATX motherboards, but clearly it'll support mini ITX as well. The eATX motherboard is going to be a little bit too big for this case. It doesn't have quite the room for all of the mounting standoffs. So I just wanted to give you an idea of what each size motherboard looks like mounted in here. This is a mini ITX board. I'm going to do the other 2 and I'll show you those as well. All right, so this is a micro ATX motherboard. This is the Gigabyte B550M DS3H AC motherboard. I think this looks really good. One possible benefit to this board is it will give you a little bit more room for cable management down here. So here I have an ATX motherboard. This is the B550 Steel Legend from ASRock. Good looking motherboard, and it looks good in the case, but as expected, it fits right flush to the very bottom of the case here. And I think that's going to make it difficult to get any cables under here. I think you're going to have to come in from the front and kind of snake them around here. And again, they're white cables, but I think that might ruin the aesthetic just a little bit for me. Might have to play around with it and see what that looks like. It can be done. It's not really like it's a deal killer or anything like that. I think it's just a vote for maybe a micro ATX motherboard might be the way to go in this. A couple of the other specs that you should be aware of pre-purchase to this is the maximum GPU length is 400 millimeters, which should accommodate, I think, virtually every GPU out there. But check the specs on your card if it's a rather large card just to make sure it's under 400. The maximum CPU cooler height, if you're going to do air cooling, is going to be 175 millimeters. So again, just check the specs on whatever cooler you're going to put in here. I think that's going to accommodate most of them. There are some pretty big coolers out there, so you'll want to check that. The maximum power supply length is 200 millimeters in the rear. Again, should accommodate most power supplies, but just make sure that it'll fit. I would recommend prior to your build, just make sure you read through the documentation. There's nothing really earth-shattering in here. It's a very simple case to get into and work with. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and get a build done. I'm going to leave the stock fans in initially, and so we can get an idea of what those look like and how they function. And I'll go ahead and replace it after I'm done with that. But I'll come back here in just a minute and show you what that looks like up and running, and we'll talk about it. All right, so I've got the build done in this MUSETEX Y6 PC case. Overall, didn't have too much trouble with it. As you can see here, I did choose to go with the micro ATX case. That ATX case just fits really flush to the bottom there, and although you can get maybe that ribbon cable under there a little bit, I didn't particularly love the look of it. It's not that it's bad, it's just, I don't really want to snake those cables around the front. So because I do have a B550 board, which is what I'm putting in here, I do have that in a micro ATX board. It's just slightly a better balanced board in this case, in my opinion. It's really going to be up to the individual builder to determine what board they like best. I just wanted to give you kind of an example of each one so that you have an understanding. But I did leave the 5 stock fans in here because I wanted to let you see what those look like when you work with those. Now the 5 MUSETEX fans, as we talked earlier, are all mounted in an exhaust orientation. I did take the 2 side ones and flip them so they are now intake. And I've got my QX120 fans down here also serving as intake, and the 3 on top is an exhaust. You'll have to play around with that and see what works best, you know, based on whatever cooling needs you have. I haven't done any in-depth cooling testing on this yet, but my initial test results are really good. They look great based on what this hardware has done in the past. I don't see any big issues with cooling with this case coming right out of the gate. But overall, I really like the look of it. You know, this 270-degree window, I think it just looks pretty sharp. There's a couple little things I can improve in here. As I talked earlier, every case is going to present some sort of cable management challenge. There's not a whole lot to work with as far as cable management mechanisms in the rear of this case, but you can spend all sorts of time getting cable management to look on point. Since I'm going to replace some of this out, it's not all completely tidied up, but it looks really good. Definitely no issues here. Using the QX120 modular fans will really help get some of the fan cabling out of there. But that's going to be up to each individual builder what you want to do. I would just have to summarize it up and encourage you that there's really no obstacles that this case is going to present that you can't get past. And on top of that, it looks really sharp. Now overall, the quality of the case and the build of it is really good. There's no sharp edges, everything's really tight, and everything's kind of well constructed. Now because I did reverse the fans over on the side, I do wish it had some filter material, but I'm going to go ahead and order some of that and just cure that. As well as the power supply over here. It's pulling air from the outside and pushing it out the back. So now, as always with any case recommendation or review that I do, it's really just going to depend whether this is the right case for you. There are so many different cases out there. There certainly are better cases out there, but there are certainly worse cases out there. Now this is a case that I'm fairly pleased with. I haven't had any major issues with it. I would highly recommend this case to you if it's an aesthetic that you like. Now there are other cases that have the same kind of style. Some of them can be quite pricey, maybe up to twice as much as this particular case here. So take a look at some of those, but if this case falls within the styling that you like and you can maybe utilize the fans in here, the only other thing to consider with this case is take a look at what motherboard you want to use. If you're going to use an ATX board in this, are you okay with some of the cables snaking around the front or having to get creative with that? But overall, doing the build in this case was a lot of fun, and I'm looking forward to working with it and doing some additional upgrades to it. So based on that, if this is a case that you like, go for it.